Before we continue with this episode of True Crime Cases, I am going to put out a little bit of a disclaimer because, unlike other cases I have covered in the past, it hasn't really been like it hits home as much as this does, because this case does involve a murder of a toddler, which is a very famous case. It involves two children, as you can probably guess by the title. It's the murder of James Bulger. So some of the things you will be hearing in this is distressing. It does depict violence, torture, just the pure brutality, and sexual assault. So if you do not want to continue with this video, honestly, I don't blame you at all. As I said, it is a very sensitive topic. So let's get into this episode of True Crime Cases. The 12th of February 1993 was considered one of the darkest days in British history, or possibly in the history of the Merseyside, as Denise Bulger and her son, James, went to the New Strand shopping centre in Boot in Merseyside, Liverpool. So basically at the same time, there were two boys playing truancy from the local primary school. These boys were Robert Thompson and John Venables. These boys were troublemakers, to say the least, in their school life and personal life outside of school. But in the New Strand, they were shoplifting. As I'm going to read from the script now, I can tell you what exactly they shoplifted. They shoplifted sweets, batteries, troll dolls, and a can of Humbrol mottling paint, which, please keep that final thing and the batteries in consideration later on in this video. And at this time, these boys had more of a sinister thought on their mind, that they wanted to abduct a child a lot younger than them, lead them out to the road and watch the traffic kill them. But around 3:40, Denise was on the lower floor with James of the shopping centre. They were in Tim's Butcher's. After getting a bit of shopping, Denise let go of James's hand to pay the butcher. And in this matter of seconds thing that Denise was doing, James was gone. Snatched and vanished. As we would find out that CCTV showed that John and Robert snatched James from Denise, leading him out to the main doors of the New Strand shopping centre. In the space of the 2 minutes that Denise lost James, they left the shopping centre around 3:42 PM. Denise, after noticing that James was gone, she went frantically searching the shopping centre completely. In a later interview with Sir Trevor MacDonald, she was quoted, "I was distraught. That one of the staff said to me, 'Calm down, come and have a cup of coffee,' and she did basically say, 'That isn't going to help to get my son back.'" While Denise was searching frantically for James, they walked a quarter of a mile away from the New Strand shopping centre to the Liverpool and Leeds Canal. At this time, this is where the violence started towards James from the two boys. The two boys picked up James and dropped him on his head, which caused a little bit of facial injuries and markings and lumps to form on his head. A bystander did witness this happen, and this is going to be a common theme when we get to this part of the case, is a lot of bystanders did witness this happen, and they just said they saw a boy crying his eyes out and tragically did nothing to help. Two boys walked James across Liverpool for about 40 they saw about 40 people, and only 38 of them did nothing. And I mean only, that's a lot. Two people stood out and asked them, Who's this boy? Is he with you? And is he okay? The two boys have basically said James was a brother and he just got hurt or fell over, and convinced that it's just a friend and two siblings together, they just let him go. And the boys decided to say that they were taking him to a police station, so I had to read the script then, but it is a lot of information I do have to remember. And at one point, the boys took James to a pet shop where they just caused havoc and got kicked out of the pet shop. We'll be reading the next part from the script because it is involving the detailed report from the police. But this next section I will be getting to is heartbreaking, and I do really completely understand if this is the point where you want to turn off the video or skip ahead. I will put the time codes in the description, so if you want to skip this horrific detail over, I do completely understand, because it is really heartbreaking. And to be honest, while researching this part, it actually does take a mental toll on you reading what happened to this James Bulger. And yeah, so if you do want to skip or turn off the video, I totally and completely understand. The boys and James arrived in Walton area of Liverpool. They found themselves opposite Walton police station. It is believed that both Venables and Thompson hesitated, but personally, I don't really think they did, because what we're going to later find out says it all, really. And they decided to take 2-year-old James Bulger up a steep banking onto the railway line near the former Walton and Anfield railway station. The reason why I didn't reveal James's age straight away is just to show how evil these two children actually were. It is absolutely awful. I just hate this bit already. I just really hate reading this bit. As one of the boys threw blue Humbrol paint in the left eye before started to kicking and stamping on James while he was on the floor. While stamping on James, they had caused one of the 10 fractures to his skulls. The next thing they moved on to was throwing stones and bricks at his face, which caused so much facial damage, swelling, markings, cuts, bruises, to the point where James looked like he's been in a fight, let alone attacked with weapons and these sadistic little shit's feet. The pair decided to use the shoplifted batteries and shove it into James's mouth, which is just alone absolutely disturbing to think that if James bit down on that and the battery cracked, that could have killed him pretty much instantly from alkaline poisoning. Which, it gets worse, and this is the biggest allegedly, I have to say. It is believed that they did shove batteries up. They shoved her up his anus. There was no evidence found that it did happen, but it is still a very, very strong possibility they did do that and removed it and just got rid of that battery. But with the way these two have been so far and the later crimes of John Venables, you do kind of have to believe it. And sadly, the final blow to James himself was a 10 kilogram, 22 pound fish plate. And if you want to know what a fish plate is, the thing that links the tracks together, each part of the track together, was picked up and dropped on his head, which caused him to die pretty much instantly and a further 9 skull fractures. Thompson and Venables decided the next move was to move Bulger's body. James's body was placed across the railway tracks with his head weighted down to the rubble. And it just gets worse. Basically, he was laid across one of the track bars. A train went over James Bulger's body, which sliced him in half. Why? Why would you do something to someone like that? It's an innocent child. It is just an innocent child. How evil can these boys be? And it would take another group of children to find Venables' body only 2 days later. A group of children who were playing along the bank of this railway track. The images they possibly had to take into adulthood is just disgusting on its own, that these two little sadistic shits did this. And luckily at this point these group of children reported it to the police station in Walton. As the police investigation began, they quickly discovered that James could have possibly been sexually assaulted, as his shoes, his socks, his trousers and underpants were removed. With the news spreading around Liverpool very, very fast, the police also discovered that a boy went missing in the New Strand shopping centre in Boot. So they started to make connections. Detective Superintendent Albert Kirby of the Merseyside Police, with members of his investigation team, required CCTV from a number of shops in the New Strand shopping centre, and CCTV from a Mother's Care spotted James. Straight away they spotted James leaving with 2 boys. This instantly ruled out registered sex offenders as suspects. This was an absolute major lead that they had to go off. So the streets of Liverpool were full of anger as well as upset and sadness. Many people outside of the schools where James went to laid flowers, and it is believed that one of these sadistic little shits actually laid flowers at these vigils for James himself. But while this was happening, the police released the footage to the press in hopes of gaining inquiries. They released it onto Crime Watch as well, which means the first ever time a murder and an appeal on Crime Watch was made in the same week. And one woman from Liverpool was watching one of these appeals being made on the news or Crime Watch. She recognised one of the boys by his distinctive yellow coat, his walk, his hairstyle and his mannerisms to be John Venables. And who does John Venables frequently hang out with? Robert Thompson. She informed the police of this and gave a little bit of a background on who these 2 boys were and how much of troublemakers they were. The police went with this, and the investigation into these 2 boys began. As the police went to Venables and Thompson's school to basically check the attendance register and find out if they were in school on that day, and they had an unauthorised absent next to their name to prove they went AWOL, they didn't show up, and I would link them to the New Strand shopping centre. As emotions and riots were at a near breaking point is running high in Liverpool, the police very, very smartly decided to send plainclothes officers in unmarked cars to arrest these two boys. Well, not necessarily arrest, take them in just for questioning, let alone arrest. First, they went to Walton to pick up 10-year-old Robert Thompson, and he lived with his mother and two younger siblings, and at the same time they were sent to John Venable's house. After Venable's mother answered the door, John appeared at the top of the stairs. Many of the police officers were absolutely astounded by John's very small frame, and they did not believe that these two 10-year-old boys were very capable of what they did, and a lot of people didn't believe these two 10-year-old boys were very capable of what they did. They thought it was teenagers that caused this. But even though the police didn't believe these were the killers, they still pressed on with interviewing these boys. And there's a lot of quotes in this section, so I'm again going to have to read off the script. Detective Sergeant Phil Roberts was tasked to interview these two boys. Roberts was trained in interviewing children and decided the best route was to almost befriend Robert Thompson without befriending him, just to give him that sense of ease that Detective Roberts is a man you can speak to very, very calmly and casually about things. And first, Thompson did deny that him and Venables were in that CCTV footage. But Detective Roberts carried on asking Thompson questions, and then it just happened out of nowhere pretty much. 10-year-old Robert Thompson broke into tears and said he grabbed hold of the baby hand and just walked around the Strand, and then he let him go loose then. Basically implicating that Venables gripped James's hand for a bit, walked around with him and just let him go, and he just wandered off. Thompson started, obviously, like I said, to blame Venables for the kidnapping, and Detective Roberts is utterly shocked that these two boys were of course capable of the murder, and he did press on to ask more questions from Thompson, and all Thompson was really worried about is how much bloody blame he's going to get for this. Did not apologise for what he did at all, didn't show any remorse, he just cared about how much blame he's going to get, basically cared about himself and not what he's just caused to the Bulger family, by quoting, "I told him to take him back, I'm going to get all the blame." And that is the side from Robert Thompson's perspective. Now we are going to move on to John Venable's perspective, which is the most revealed and detailed part of it. 3 miles away from Walton Police Station, where Robert Thompson was held, John Venables was getting interviewed in Lower Lane Police Station. After Thompson's admission, the detectives interviewing Venables asked him about the snatching at New Strand, and he just basically doubly repeated, I never. Venables' mother knew her son was lying, so she pressed on and said, you best be telling the truth to the police. In which John replied to his mother, God's honest truth, I'm telling you, we never. As I noticed, the police that John was going to be much harder to break down into getting a confession out of. So they decided to weigh John down. Detective Kirby arrived and asked Venables if he took James Bulger's hand. John started to crack and got very angry and upset, saying, we never, he's a liar, in reference to Thompson's confession, or near confession to say the least. Bursting into tears, the detective told him to calm down. As he continued, I never got the boy, "I never killed him, Mum." And his mother saying that she believes her son, but the emotional Venables says, "You think I've killed him." John's mother heartbrokenly told her son, "Look, you've got to tell these detectives the truth. But always remember, irrespective of what happens, we'll always support you." Which is damning, because she didn't say "we'll always love you." And after this little revelation from John's mother, a motherly compassion being shown to him, John cracked and said, "I did kill James. Will you tell his mummy I'm sorry? I will always remember those words." And that was a big turning point, Detective Kirby said. And now the police have finally got the killers of James Bulger. On February the 20th, 1993, both Thompson and Venables were formally charged with murder. They were detained in custody, but with a lynch mob after them, it was probably the safest option, and another thing was decided, that their names would not be released to the public. They were referred as Child A and Child B, with Child A being Robert Thompson and Child B being John Venables. The trial began on November the 1st, 1993 at Preston Crown Court. Both Venables and Thompson were tried as adults and entered a not guilty plea, which is crazy itself because John literally confessed to murder. And both boys have denied that they were murderers and abductors, and attempted abduction of another boy, which they tried to do before James Bulger. The trial lasted 24 days, and on the 24th of November 1993, after 6 hours of deliberation, John Venables and Robert Thompson was found guilty of murder and abduction of James Bulger. Mr. Justice Morland sentenced them to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, which is just absolutely disgraceful, for a minimum of 8 years. And of course, anger ensued from this across the United Kingdom, which felt like it wasn't long enough, because that means that when the 8 years is up in 2001, they could be released. And Denise Bulger and Ralph Bulger, which is James's dad, appealed this to be broadened a much longer, to possibly even a life sentence. The factor is that Her Majesty's pleasure really got these boys off. The fears did come true that the release would come. In July 2001, both Thompson and Venables were no longer considered a threat to public safety, and paroled and released as a minimum tariff expired that February of that year. Home Secretary Blunkett actually approved this. So the boys were released back into the public, and they were given new identities and moved under a secret location under a witness protection style program. With public outrage and fears of a lynch mob was basically growing for bigger and bigger by the day, because don't get me wrong, the public actually wanted to go out and dish out vigilantism and mob justice and kill these two boys. So the government decided to move fast in protecting these two boys. They took out a global injunction that if you share an image of these two, put any sort of description of these two to the point where it is just possibly what John Venables' weight could be, or if the media decide to post an image or release the identities, locations where they are, this could mean a prison sentence or a really, really hefty fine. And this didn't just apply to the United Kingdom, this global injunction, as is hence global injunction. You could be a newspaper in South Korea and you decide to post something about John Venables, that's it for you. You'll be taken to court for that because you broke this injunction set by the British government. And a lot of people have been thrown into prison for a long time by revealing possibly the identity of these two people. And if you're going to ask, no, I am not putting anything of their current identity, or even I didn't even look into it while researching. I just looked into what this injunction is and just left it at that. But the anonymity part of it all angered Denise Fergus now, as she divorced her husband Ralph at the time and remarried, in that the public should know who and where Venables and Thompson are, so public safety should remain where it is. But they were protected now by this global injunction. After the release, Robert Thompson did seemingly disappear into his new identity, minus the odd occasion where people tried to dish out vigilante justice and revealed his identity, but he has kept a low profile. On the other hand, John Venables was very different. In 2010, it was revealed to the public that John Venables has been arrested and no further details would be made. It was believed that Venables was in possession of child pornography, but the British government refused to release these details even more until a later date, after much pressure by the public and Denise Fergus herself. And shockingly, Denise wasn't even informed that John was rearrested for this, and her anger ensued to another campaign against his anonymity and against Robert Thompson's anonymity as well, to be lifted so people know why John Venables was rearrested. But this, on multiple occasions, has been rejected. But it was eventually revealed to the public that John Venables was convicted of possession of child pornography and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. After the 2 years was up, Venables was released, but again, in 2017, he was arrested once again and sentenced to prison again for a much longer sentence, as he was found to have child abuse imagery on his devices, whether that be his computer, his mobile phone, his tablet, whatsoever. And thankfully, John Venables remains in prison to this day. That was the shocking killing of James Bulger by the two most evil children you can ever come across, Robert Thompson and John Venables. Following the loss of their son, Denise and Ralph Bulger did welcome another child, a baby boy called Michael, 10 months after the death of James. But following this, the marriage was rocky and it did fell apart, and the couple divorced due to the loss of their son. Only 2 years later though, Denise would meet an electrician called Stuart Fergus, and they would go on to marry and have 2 children themselves, which the couple remain married now. Denise would eventually release a book detailing her story of what happened, and it is and the title of the book, I can't remember exactly. It is actually sad. It is possibly going to be a hard book to read. if you do want to purchase it, I'll put the Amazon link down below. And Denise did end up setting up a charity called the James Bulger Memorial Trust in March 2011, which would signify James's 21st birthday. This charity helps disadvantaged children in the local areas and community get funding, they need education, and possibly events ran to get them off the streets. They also recognise people doing great work in community, nominating them down for rewards and helping them get the exposure and funding that they need to carry on the good work that they do. So guys, if you do want to donate to this charity, the link is in the description below. I'm going to be making a donation to her as well, because it is a really good cause. And it is partnered with some very, very good people in the local community, whether it be the supermarkets like Asda, Sainsbury's, banks like Nationwide, shops like Matalan, and also the two local Merseyside football clubs in Liverpool and Everton. That is possibly the hardest true crime case I've ever written and made. And I do like covering some of the famous cases like Jack the Ripper, Dr. Crippen, and I've got some ones coming up as well, like the Rostov Ripper, which is another horrific child killer, which I'm probably going to actually put on the back burner for a bit. And I do like covering, like Arthur One, who's another Merseyside-based criminal, stalker, pervert, like Purple Aki, and I've got Michael Fagan coming up, who's the Buckingham Palace prowler, Iron Mike Malloy, who's the New York's boozy Rasputin, who had probably more lives than a cat. But this case was really hard to look into, and I honestly didn't know after these. I knew of what happened to James Bulger. I knew that he was left for dead and who John Venables and Robert Thompson were. But some of the details, I didn't know about the batteries. I didn't know he got severed in half by a train. I didn't know anything what happened to him with the Liverpool and Leeds Canal, and a lot of the interrogation I didn't know. And it was really hard to actually look into. And I do advise a lot of people, if they do want to look into this case in more detail than I have covered it, this is a warning. It is very, very hard to look into, and I did leave a lot of detail off you for that reason. And also, if you want to be a vigilante and break this global injunction, don't even attempt it. It's not worth it. I didn't do it while researching this. I don't think I will do it, because they'll put your name on the list and it'll keep an eye on you, because you never know, they might come knocking on why you viewed and shared an image of John Venables and Robert Thompson. The government don't want you to see their faces for a reason. So I do advise you not to look for it or seek it. And I think I'm going to end the video here. I will have more exploring videos and true crime cases coming up. And again, the link is in the description below for the James Bulger Memorial Trust. So if you want to donate, you can. And goodbye.